Hello everyone and welcome to our video about the chapter An Alternative to the Ideology of Social Justice from the book Cynical Theories.
We have to start by saying that postmodern theory and liberalism are not only in tension, they totally disagree. Liberalism sees knowledge as something we can learn about reality more or less objectively. Theory sees knowledge as something entirely created by human being stories we tell ourselves, largely in a writing service of maintaining our own social position, privilege, and power. So, let us begin by talking about the differences between these two. While liberalism obtains knowledge through reality in an objective way, theory sees knowledge as something created by humans. Liberalism embraces categorization and clarity, while theory has neither limits nor categories. Liberalism recognizes universal values as a human value. Theory is in favor of political identities. Liberalism believes in dignity. Theories believes in victimization. Liberalism favors debate to arrive at truth, while theory rejects debate for supposedly reinforcing dominant discourses. Also, while liberalism uses theory to arrive to truth, postmodernism insists that truth is a language game, whereas liberalism accepts self criticism and self correction, theory does not accept criticism. Finally, while liberalism believes in progress, theory focuses on obstructing progress.
And although liberalism is not perfect and it makes mistakes, it always seeks to reinvent itself, to move forward, to be better for the sake of progress and freedom for all. Now we would like to talk about why is freedom of debate important. We are all accustomed to thinking of freedom of expression as a universal human right protected by the Constitution of democratic countries and in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. When we think of freedom of expression in this way, we naturally tend to focus on the right of the speaker to say what he or she believes, without censorship or punishment. But this focus sometimes leads us to forget the overriding importance of freedom of speech for listeners or potential listeners, and especially for listeners who disagree with the speaker as well as the undecided. We find that this censorship can be negative in the sense that although the opposite idea might be wrong, it can always contribute to the construction of knowledge and perhaps to the refinement of the thinking of others. Additionally, if we do not allow ourselves to question the ideas put forward, humanity could never be as sure of their truth as it is now. If we do not accept the challenge of opening our minds, we fail in the attempt to reach certainties. Freedom of debate would still allow them to further improve their theory and give more rational confidence in the correctness of the theory by virtue of its successful confrontation with opposing ideas. Well, and you might be wondering, what is happening with the debate? It looks like the theories seek is not rational confidence in the truth of their ideas, freedom, or debate, so they avoid debate at all cost. Debate can even become, from their point of view, optional or even counterproductive. Now we would like to talk about how theory does not understand liberalism. What apparently happens is that postmodernism does not understand what liberalism is all about. Liberalism is not about perpetuating privilege. It is about freedom, equality, and equal opportunity for all. Something that theory does not understand and ends up distorting is that liberalism is a way of oppression to perpetuate privilege. However, liberalism focused on people for what they are, people. It understands that values and dignity are for everyone without making distinctions, which is different from what the theory does. Theory is based on political identities that only reinforce victimization of people. By this, we do not mean that liberalism is perfect. No, we mean that it is functional. And although it fails, because it fails, it seeks for a better world for all, no matter if it's a slow and imperfect process. Even if this process implies to allow theory, criticize them, and working on team with them.
Now we would like to talk about liberal science. Liberalism method of gaining knowledge is a method where no one has the final word and no one has a personal authority. And it is based on two basic principles, the skeptical rule and the empirical rule. These particular rules are two of the most successful social conventions the human species has developed. Why? Because these two rules define a decision making system that people can agree to use to determine which options deserve to be believed. And it works because the system cannot fix the outcome in advance or forever. There is no last word and cannot distinguish between participants. There is no personal authority. In this case, the authors mention some principles against what we have just mentioned. The first one is the fundamentalist principle. Those who know the truth should decide who is right. This principle is totalitarian, and it is based on the need for social justice to tip the balance in order to reach power and silence criticism. In the second place, we have the simple egalitarian principle. All people's sincere beliefs have the same right to be respected. This one implies that something doesn't need to be truth in order to be respected. The third one, the radical egalitarian principle, like the simple egalitarian principle, but the beliefs of people of historically oppressed classes or groups receive special consideration. This principle is based on the point of view of the theory that all ideas are equally valid, although some have been devaluated due to prejudice and must now be brought to the forefront. In the fourth place, we have the humanitarian principle. Any of the above, but with the proviso that the first priority is to do not harm anyone. This is basically the justification for censoring certain ideas that are believed to cause harm, an argument found in all social justice scholarship and activism. And we have the last one, that is the liberal principle. The testing of each by each through public criticism is the only legitimate way to decide who is right. Unlike the other four, this last principle cannot be accepted by postmodern social justice thinking. The theory insists that it is not acceptable to criticize some ideas. It also argues that whether a person is right or wrong cannot be established by assessing the soundness of his ideas, but depends on his identity and his willingness to employ appropriate discourses. Checking one by one is effectively impossible in theory, since people from different identity groups can never fully understand each other. And as a conclusion, we can say that this is the essence of postmodernist knowledge principles. It is clear that postmodernism contains a rejection of liberalism at its core.
Following with the topics presented before, we will make a contrast between postmodernism and liberalism by stating each of the principles and the themes of postmodernism and how they could be enlightened by liberalism ideas. The first idea that we should have in mind is that postmodernism has tried to solve many problems in society, but they haven't been really good addressed by it. That's why authors promote to be back to the paradigm of universal liberalism, which of course has some problems as postmodernism does, but at least it is fueled by scientific knowledge production and these scholars to value back the reason and the evidence-based approaches. Once we set our path in knowledge acquisition, it will give us freedom and we are not going to be attached to any political assumption, as for example, postmodernism leads us to do. It is important to know that liberalism promotes self-correction, adapting, and progressing. As both ideologies seem to be very different, we will see how they are related. In the first principle, we have the postmodern knowledge principle, and it states that knowledge is a cultural construction artifact. And in certain point, it is true. However, what is wrong with this principle is that it tries to give temporary solutions or explanations about what is going on in the world, but it doesn't go further. Instead, liberalism proposes a better method, which is following reason and evidence. It is true that it would take a little bit more time, but science works and it is not racist or sexist, white or imperialistic. It is just science, and it belongs to everyone. Postmodernism proposes to listen and believe, and it encourages confirmation bias, depending on how we're listening to. In contrast, liberalism proposes to listen and consider, which takes more time but is a better way to reach knowledge. As a second aspect, we have the postmodern political principle. It holds that the social construction of knowledge is directly tied to political power. This is because the more powerful discourses a culture create, the more people they will have supporting them, following without any question what they state as true and knowledge. It creates a zero-sum game. It's a situation in which one person or group can win something only by causing another person or group to lose it. Dividing up the budget is a zero-sum game. The problem of this game is that as the power chose how to believe and what to believe in them, it doesn't have any issues. However, they are not taking into account that we are humans, and as humans, we have some fallibility. Liberalism takes into account that fallibility. The first theme of postmodernism is the blurring of boundaries. And at this point, it is kind of wise to know that skepticism is not that bad because some boundaries should be tested, pushed, and moved. What is wrong is radical skepticism because they make you doubt about everything and judge everything without any foundation. In contrast, liberalism principles uses science and reason to debunk both socially conservative and postmodern ones. This is very important because we need to take into account that we need to blur the boundaries, but in a very good way. It means that we need to have based evidence in order to judge and in order to filter the information we're going to take into account. The second theme is to focus on the power of language. And this is pretty important because liberalism recognizes that language has the power to combine and persuade, to change minds, and to change society. That's why they agree to share ideas and see what is the best by some methods we already know and we are going to work because we use reason mostly to justify our existing beliefs, desires, and underlying intuitions. Being a group where people can have different reasoning will have great results. The idea of liberalism is that we can have different ideas converging together in order to create a major purpose. However, the ideal of social justice is restrict what is said, and bans on ideas and terminologies, of course. Those terminologies that are posed by others with unsupported evidence and reason. The strategy is always ban what is said. This characteristic from the ones who hold the majority view of political power, becoming this into an oppressive dominant discourse, which needs to be deconstructed and countered. It is known that each of us are individuals, but at the same time we are part of a culture. That's why the third theme is cultural relativism, in which social justice as the principle, not the ideology, can only be served if we have consistent principles, like women's rights, LGBTI rights, and racial ones, etc., that may critique the oppression of those who talk in a privileged position. Then liberalism believes in individual freedom and universal human rights that will understand that there is a variety of human variation depending on the cultures we belong to. But that difference is okay because we come from one common nature, humanity. We need to support the equal rights, opportunities, and freedoms of all women, LGBTI people, all the racial and religious minorities, as well because these values don't belong to the West, but to everybody and everywhere. It is important to understand that culture makes us different, but at the same time, it helps us to enrich ourselves in order to construct societies. In the fourth thumb of postmodernism, we have the loss of the individual and the universal. And here it is important to state that individualism and universalism cannot describe the whole of human experience, because we exist within communities that change our perspective of the way we experience the world. It is not valid to be considered true and oppressive groups just because it has been labeled as authentic by the theory. It is important as well to recognize individuals as part of a community. We need to develop empathy by understanding human nature. The theory of social justice encourages labels and divides humans into marginalized identity groups, and they oppress us as well, feeling our worst tendencies. The loss of the individual on the universal states that we are going to be judged based on our group beliefs, which is kind of problematic because we all are individuals, part of a big group.